Thank you, and welcome to the Agency Balance Podcast, where we talk about marketing, tech, real-life self-improvements, and things that make you happy to find your balance. Agency Balance is sponsored by Smartacre, a marketing technology agency that creates solutions that align B2B marketing, sales, and service to drive results throughout the entire customer journey. Get the MarTech experts. Get Smartacre.com. Here is your host of the Agency Balance Podcast, David Snyder.
Welcome to the Agency Balance, everyone. Super pumped to have the co-founder of TheMarketingHelp, Erik Harbison, and a longtime colleague and friend of mine joining me today. Erik, welcome.
Dave, happy to be here.
Well, Erik is so passionate about offering mentorship, coaching, making connections that enable success for the next generation of marketers and marketing talent that are out there. Erik, thanks so much for joining me today. I would love to just share with our audience a little bit about, how you got started, what the Marketing Help is all about. I mean, you've worked in your career over like agencies and brands and tech. You've done it all. Can you share a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I think I'm one of those people that knew what I wanted to do when I was, probably 6, 7, 8 years old. And I always wanted to be in advertising. Now, again, we're going back years here, pre-internet. And knowing that, was fortunate enough to go get a degree in advertising. And then when graduating with that degree, almost knew that I wanted to be in a space where I could do what I was doing in one of my communications classes, which was media planning. So that led me to an agency that took me on a 20-year stretch of working for different agencies, mid-size, large size, independent, publicly owned, even started my own agency, which ended up getting acquired, which I think is where we ended up meeting. So 20 years of agencies told me, hey, I learned a ton. And then I decided, something I started doing probably 10 years into my career was focusing on some career planning sessions for myself. Now, again, I'm doing this by myself. I had no mentorship. I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do next. And at that point, 20 years of agencies, I said, it's time to go client side because I think quite honestly was burnout of the agency space. And that led me to a chief marketing officer role with a software company, which again, a different perspective on leveraging everything I've learned in growing teams, really learning a lot about myself as a manager and leader. And that ran for about 5 years, and then had the same career planning session that I had I would call it epiphany, but realized that I wanted to do something that was more focused on fulfillment as opposed to, compensation and other things. So that led me to double down on really reinstating the Marketing Help, which is something I've been doing probably after 15 years into my career, but now I want to make it official, and I wanted to give back. And I was in a position where I felt like I had an ability to help marketers with their careers, and I learned this from doing one-on-ones with teams of all sizes, and wanted to make that something full-time. So I was able to secure enough client work to leave my CMO role and do this full-time.
That's amazing. That's the dream, right?
Yes. I mean, whether it's planned or unplanned or just, one day you wake up, I think in my case, it was just, really having a hard conversation with myself in terms of which path do I want to go here? Because there's, CMO role. I mean, a lot of marketers dream of getting to that level and then, going horizontally across different verticals. And I think for me, it was all about, there was something here that I really wanted to pursue.
Yeah. I mean, for me, when I decided to say, all right, I'm going to go out and do my own thing, this was a decade ago, I knew right away I was like working for myself. I would never work for anybody else, quote unquote, again. I knew that once I got a taste of different freedom of controlling your own destiny, right? Or density, like they say in Back to the Future.
That's right.
But so I never worked on the client side. For those who are listening, and I have a lot of agency listeners out there, or maybe there's some folks that are listening and they're thinking about switching, going to the client side. Just talk a little bit about like maybe pros and cons, or things that you maybe didn't expect when you left agency to go to the client side.
Yeah. So, and this is going to be different for everyone, but I think the brand that I decided to work for was a product. So it was very product centric. And the challenge for me was having all this agency experience, fortunate enough to come up with ideas and execute a lot of ideas for my clients. So I had a litany of ideas on what I could do to help this one brand. And sometimes it was, having to educate, right? Having to educate stakeholders that would approve things on how to do things. Now, again, we do that in agencies sometimes, but you're kind of being selected and you're being trusted to do those things. So it's not maybe as hard of a sell. So there's some challenges there with educating on why branding is important. I think that was one learning. I think the other, I guess in my role was working client side, it was the importance of understanding what every other department did. So agency side, you're the specialist. You're hired to do your thing. Client side, as a marketer, yes, you're working to support that one focus, that one brand, but it took me a couple of trips before I realized that I should probably spend some time with the engineering team to understand how can we make their lives easier because of our requests are coming in. And there just was some process things that had to be, I had to figure out and had to get accustomed to.
Yeah. So I know working on the agency side, and when I'm asking and interviewing, because in my role I'm kind of leading sales, right? I'm qualifying to find the next best client partner for us, and I think about those CMOs and I ask them questions like, have you ever worked with another agency? How many resources do you have? Are you a team of one? Are you a team of four? What's your relationship with sales? So I think what you're talking about there is, making sure that you don't just assume that you're working in this specialist vacuum role of like, hey, I'm the smartest marketer here now, I can control everything, but you really have to integrate into the other departments to be successful.
Yeah, and I learned I learned more than I thought I would from other departments, simply just because I had to open myself up to learn about the ins and outs of customer support, right? It's not just taking phone calls. There's a lot more to it than that. I had I was fortunate enough to be tasked with building a sales team. So that was interesting too, because oftentimes marketing is just put into a position to go figure it out with sales and figure out how that relationship goes. So that was hard. And that was a learning experience, and got it to a point where we brought in somebody to run the sales team. But again, being part of that process allowed me to help be part of the decision process on who we hired. Great guy we hired to run the sales team, and was able to maintain that relationship, which is very key.
Yeah. So I'd imagine when you made that decision of, or you knew that this was going to be the step, I'm going to leave the agency world. I'm going to go switch to finding to be this next chief marketing officer somewhere. And this is what I want to dig into this topic a little bit about the balancing of making a switch. Because we talked the other week about thinking about when you're finding your next career, and we talk about balance, right? On this podcast, it's like running two jobs. It's like you have to still be a good, reliable resource with your current position, and don't. Trust me, people who don't want to burn bridges. This world is way too small. It will come back and bite you. So don't burn any bridges. Leave on the high note. Especially because the people that you're working with now, you may work with them in the future. But balancing those two jobs, holding the current position, and then starting to look for the next. Talk about that, like how much of an effort that was, and what that experience was like.
Well, a balance is interesting because, I look at balance from two ways. One, the way that you're talking about, but the other way is, something that I've realized when it comes to looking for jobs is there are 6 main factors that drive someone to look for a new job, and balance is one of them. And, we do this exercise with all of our clients when it comes to looking for jobs is ranking and prioritizing these 6 factors. Again, balance, location, company, salary, title, challenge. And you'd be surprised, just anecdotally, the last 2 years of all the marketers I've worked with, guess what's in the top 3? Balance. So me seeking that role as a client or on the client side was strictly tied to balance being one of my top 3 priorities. So I was seeking something that was going to give me more balance, that wasn't 80-hour weeks, traveling 3 days a week to New York. My kids were at a point now where there's, more things we could be doing together. So balance was a driver for me to find something find a role that's going to be able to. Now, I'm not saying it was an easy cush gig and, it was always 9 to 5, but there are other balance points to that role. So that's the first level of balance. Now, to the balance in looking for that job and seeking that transition, you got to ask yourself, how committed are you to it? How motivated are you to the switch? And once you decide that there's an end goal, I think for me, I was giving myself a timeline of, I think by the end of the summer at this point, to transition out of my agency role. So that gave me a chance to work backwards and say, well, what has to happen between now and end of summer to get the right conversations? So that was the first kind of mindset shift. And then when it comes to executing, when do you do this, right? Because you're right. I had clients that were very demanding. I had projects that were in flux. So you had to make sure that things were getting across the line. And everyone talks about nights and weekends to be the balance of when you're going to find time to do this. And, admittedly, if I had to schedule interviews, this is back in the time when we were all in office and I had an office. So if I could carve out, I wouldn't do it during regular work hours, but lunchtime. Because again, this is years ago when, everyone was focused on that hour lunch or 30 minutes for lunch. You maximize that time. And it wasn't every lunchtime per week, but maybe it's a couple. But, in the conversations I was having at the roles I was interviewing for, people understood that. So lunchtime was a good time to make progress. Nights and weekends are the other times. I would tell myself, I wouldn't sacrifice time at night with the kids. And if they went to bed, then I had an hour to do some more research, and I would only use it for research. And that kept me focused on just doing the thing in that block of time. And then weekends were more of the developing resumes and developing assets.
Yeah, there's two things that stood out to me, and I'll caveat this by I haven't had to switch jobs in a decade. So remember everybody, I'm not working for anybody else ever again. So I'll be interviewing with myself for my next role. But what's interesting is, one, the first thing that I would think of is like you're trying to like squeeze in that interview or that phone screen or that even applying in with my day. That's hard, right? So why not just take the whole freaking day off then, like to be focused and give it the attention it needs versus rushing? Because I think you can come off as, even today, like if you're just jumping from one Zoom to the next, like give yourself some time to prepare for that. Like I've been on interviews with candidates right, that I've just like, they look and they sound right, they're on papers right, but like they just don't, something's not right, something's off, they're feeling rushed. And I just think that's important, to spend the appropriate amount of time that it needs. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out is communication. I think communicating with the company that you're applying for and being like, listen, I'm a dad, I got soccer duties, all these things, right? Like be upfront with them and be like, my nights are not going to be, my late afternoons it's not going to be good for me. Here is my flexibility. Here's the balance of my normal day in life. Share that with them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because if they can respect that communication, then that gives them a sense of your character and who they're potentially going to be hiring. And when I think about the interview process for that role that I moved into, there was a half day or two that I may have taken here and there. There was couple on-site visits that were worked into the workday. But I would do them, I think they were early. So they were early morning, maybe pre 9, 10 o'clock. Because remember, at that time I had to then get into a physical office after that on-site meeting. But you're right, virtually now it's, take the time. I wouldn't say it's easier, but it does require a little bit more of schedule, manipulation, if you will.
Yeah. So with the folks that you're helping right now with mentorship and coaching and trying to come up in the ranks, or starting to think about even maybe it's within the existing company, Talk about some of the things and characteristics that you've seen to really, start to get them propelled and prepared for that next role. I mean, is like research have to be a part of that? Because that's the first thing that comes to mind with some of our new hires is they shared with me early on that like, I did a lot of research on you guys. I did a lot of research beyond, your company pages. Leadership, like I looked at your social stuff. I want to know who I'm going to be working for. So either in a role, either have you seen anything with roles where people are trying to, level up, but also coming into a brand new company? Talk about anything that you've seen there.
Yeah, I think you can see it over my shoulder here if it's in the video, but the thing I tell everybody, every marketer here, is about mindset, starting with controlling what you can control, because just the notion of those two scenarios, first job or leveling up in your job, there's so many things that you cannot control that will drive you crazy. And that's typically the thing that will cause marketers to lose steam, become disconnected or give up. So when you focus on the things you can control, things become a little bit more clear and the confidence level goes through the roof. So to that point you made, yes, the advice that I'm providing now is, let's take it for the new marketer, new job, or early stage marketer career switching into their first marketing job. Research, you hit it, is key. And everything you've been hearing from those candidates is a must nowadays, even just to get considered for that phone screen interview. But if you can control and look at the right things, then you will stand out, head and shoulders above. Trust me, the bar's low, and there's a lot of lazy job seekers out there that just think that my certification list will get me in. And we know that it's much more than that. So research is key. The second thing is engaging with these companies. So imagine, and you've probably had this happen for candidates looking to apply to work with Smartacre, where they're engaging with your posts on social media, not just you personally, but the business. And they're not just liking it, but they're commenting and saying thoughtful things. Well, when it comes time to interview somebody, and let's say, Jamie Smith rings a bell because you've seen her name on those posts, she's automatically gotten your attention subconsciously, but that engagement also pays off when it comes time for the conversation. So again, there's this level of visibility that matters when looking for those roles. So like research, engaging are two kind of key steps before any sort of outreach or messaging. You talk about balance. I will 100% recommend a balance focused more on conversations first versus applications, and it should be imbalanced in terms of 90% of one, maybe less than 10% of the other, just because of the ability to focus on meeting people first. People, you want to meet a person, and you want a person to meet you and your personality before a piece of paper.
Yeah, and it obviously depends on the role, right? If it's a more heads down role and you're I would say in the agency world, non-client facing role, you're looking for different types of characteristics. But yeah, that's for us, culture is always number one. Like we're always hiring for character and culture and how they're going to contribute to our culture. I always say, like, every time we add a person, our culture changes, and that's the way it should, right? Because they're applying different things to make your culture improve and get better. So yeah, we're always looking for that. And for me, I am always interested in the types of questions I get asked too in that process. Like the worst. Note this down, everybody.
Oh yeah.
I'm okay. I'm the interviewer. And do you have any questions for me? No, I'm good. Oh, really? You have no questions about the role that you're going to commit majority of your time to, more than your family. You haven't even maybe learned about what the salary and the benefit, anything. Just ask me anything. But like the questions that to me is a little bit of a tell of what type of individual they are.
So I love that point, because what I tell marketers that I work with is that if you've ever done that before, you'll never do it again moving forward, because what you just did, or that experience of not having any questions, is like going to a restaurant, someone put a menu in front of you and all it says in the menu is food. And someone says, what can I get you? And you'll say, I'll just take that. And you're going to tell me that you're okay just kind of throwing, and you're good because you know that all you're getting is food, as opposed to maybe digging a little deeper and asking some questions that are relevant, right? So you can make a good decision. So you're right. It pains me. And you've done this before, I'm sure, where you just try to, are you sure you don't have any questions? Maybe about me, maybe about the company. You're trying to lead them to maybe get something. And then that usually, I mean, just the fact that they say nothing, that doesn't help them in their cause. But if they even try to just, okay, sure, tell me about yourself. Like if they throw that back at you, then the interview's over.
Yeah. So let's talk about the flip side. Let's talk about people bouncing. Because I know you've talked about this a lot, and I do want to touch on this. I really haven't talked too much about it on the agency balances, but the Great Resignation, and this whole process in which once a individual decides that they're going to leave, they make it known internally, and maybe they're going to do that in a bunch of different ways, and then they'll do their coveted LinkedIn post saying, you know, I was so blessed and yada yada yada, insert Seinfeld reference, and then they go out, and then it's mysterious of where they're going. They don't tell you anything. As the employer, you're like, well, what can we do to be better? And then mysteriously, a few days in, boop, here's where I am, and this is why, and everything's rosy. So so I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek there, but it's affected us. It has, and I think it's for me, and I would love to get your take on this, like what I've kind of boiled it down to, and I have, brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and other, business people that I interact with that own all different types of businesses. And the one thing that I summarized it is purpose. Like, I just feel like coming out of everything, which now we're getting back into things again, but it's like, they want purpose. They want to be purposeful. They just don't want to be doing this job. They want to be able to be making an impact. They want to have some sort of, when I wake up in the morning, I want to know that I am doing good or moving something forward, that I'm achieving both for me and for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Here's something I've seen, because I've worked with some clients, some big marketing teams, and our job was to identify and develop skill development programs for their marketers. And the biggest indicator that someone is going to leave, and it aligns with what you're saying with purpose, is we would interview everyone in this team, and we'd ask them to rate their rate 3 pillars: success, reward, fulfill. Or, how successful do you feel in your role? And, are you put in a position to succeed? Rank from 1 to 5. 1 being low, 5 being high. Reward: are you being paid fairly for your value? Now, again, this makes these are positioned to say, does this person even know their value? And most people always feel like they're underpaid, but it opens a good discussion to say, why is that? What should you get paid? And when some people say, I have no idea, well, then they don't know what their true value is. So it forces them to understand, what should you be getting paid based on your role and how many years experience, and whether there's opportunities for being rewarded. And the last is fulfillment, which is from a 1 to 5. How connected are you to being fulfilled in your role? Meaning, this isn't about generating a high click-through rate. This is about, do you feel connected to your customers or your clients, and they're actually improving their lives or impacting their lives in a positive way? So when someone's scoring less than 3 average on all 3 of those, like together, they're done. I think they've already made up their mind and they're gone. Those that can be saved obviously are hanging on to the fulfillment, where they feel like there's something that at least gets them out of bed in the morning to say, I'm going to do my job. I may not like this, but gosh, I feel really good at the end of the day because we're helping X customer achieve Y. So I think those are indicators or ways to indicate, is someone's going to leave. But then this is pre-pandemic. So if you apply the same methodology in the pandemic, it does open up for some good conversations to see who's a flight risk. But then, to your point about purpose, is when I've asked people why they've left, and purpose comes up, I ask them to define it, and it's really hard for them to define what they mean by purpose. And oftentimes when you dig into what the purpose really is, it's either money or it's more responsibility that all could have been obtained at their current company or the company they wanted to leave or have left. And then you dig a little deeper, and guess what? And I think we know where this is going. It's the other reason why people, or the main reason why people leave companies. It's because of manager, team, culture, management. So with all those things on the table, it gives some direction on understanding, if you're a manager of people, why somebody may want to be leaving. If you're hiring for candidates, focus on asking questions in those areas to understand their true purpose for leaving. And do you want that person on your team?
Yeah. No, that's great insight, and I love that rating system. I mean, we're doing something a little similar. I think if you don't have a platform, use Google polls, people. Like, there's no excuse for it. You have to be working at it. I got asked in one of the groups that I belong into. They're like, "Well, how do you do all this stuff? Like, it just like, seems like you're crushing it and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Well, thank you," but I'm like, you gotta freaking work at it.
Yeah.
You have to work at this stuff. Don't just assume that what worked 2 years ago is working right now. It absolutely isn't. I can tell you that, because there were some things that I didn't pay attention to and just assumed that, well, we made it through the pandemic and we didn't have to lay anybody off and everybody's just going to stay with you. Wrong. That's not going to, you can't think that way. You have to be always thinking about what is next. How are we changing? How are we evolving? And when I talk about growth, it doesn't necessarily mean adding headcount. It's growing the people, the individuals that you have, and the things that how you're changing, and going from all, to having offices and semi-virtual to all virtual. It's even more different.
Yeah. I mean, I remember running a team of 20 inside of an agency, and I'd always try to carve out time for working on the business, so to speak, because I would look at my book of business and my team as our own business. Work on the business versus in the business. And whenever I had these sessions, and I try to do like twice a month, people, process, performance. A lot of the things you're saying there, and I would look at those and ensure that I was giving myself balance across the three of these, meaning people are the right people on the bus here and in the right seats. And then to your point, who can be developed more? Because I need a captain. I need to identify someone that can be a number two. Process, because it's always changing and it's never followed 100%. Where are we falling down there? Are we getting gripes from clients? And performance, obviously, is a performance-based agency. It was, are we hitting our numbers? But it was also looked at, how are we performing within our book of business, within all the other account teams? Like, are we measuring up? So, I think inside of an agency, as a leader of team, it was, I would feel myself putting too much in one of these categories, and then that's why I gave myself time to step back and say, I got to make sure it's not always going to be evenly distributed, but I've got to put focus where there's the most need given what's going on.
Yep, exactly. I think when I look back at some of the failures, right, is just assuming that everything was good, right? Everyone is paid. Everyone assumes that they know where they're going. Everybody assumes they know where they can go, and that's wrong.
Right.
You have to be purposeful and put it out there and be like, if you're in this position, this is where you can go. This is your clear job description, but you can level up to here, or know that you can move from this department to that department, or know that you have a platform of that. If you achieve this from a performance, you can make this. I think just like it goes back to the food menu, right? You need to know what the food costs. You need to know what is generally in that dish. Mm-hmm. You have to spell that out. Like, you have to have up-to-date job descriptions. You have to have, like, we're going through updating our handbook right now, and how much that has changed in a couple of years. Things that, like, what is a COVID policy? Like, what do we do from, now that we're all Zoom, like, what does your background look like? Oh, there's so many different things that you're not thinking about,
right,
to be successful. But you have to work on that. Like, you have to put the time into those things. And if you're not, and I think the other thing, right? If you're in a role and you're listening to this and any of those things, you're like, you know what is going on with my company? They're not asking about things. Ask your manager. I tell everyone in my company, I'm like, hold me accountable. Like, hold your leadership team accountable. Ask them questions and follow up.
Yep.
Why not?
Yep. I love that because the moment that somebody does, or the people that do, then that's where you want to spend your time. Another tip I learned from a mentor a couple roles ago was, again, part of it's my innate just kind of personality is wanting to help everyone. And I was told, like, why are you spending time with that person? Because they're checked out, and I'll be shocked if they're here in 3 months. And here's me, like, I can save them. I think there's a role here. We can find a place for them. And it became about, me waking up and saying, you're not going to save everybody. You do your best, but again, you can't help people that don't want to be helped. So that was a huge eye opener to then focus my energies on places where there's energy sources of more positive energy than negative energy when it comes to, applying support, direction, what have you. So again, tying back to the asking people just to ask questions and be honest, that's going to be a way to identify where you can put your energies, where there's going to be some return. Yeah.
Sounds like you have a lot of good resources on this. Can you just share a little bit about the Marketing Help, the website, the platform, what any of our listeners can find on there?
Yeah. So the Marketing Help, again, it was designed, me and my co-founder, Jed Singer, we designed this to be something we wish we had when we were navigating our careers into our first agency, first management position, et cetera. So the main focus of the platform, if you will, is going to be the ability to get access to coaching. And everyone needs that sounding board. And it's an independent, someone that may not have any stake in the game to what your situation is, but we can help. Because between the two of us, we've pretty much been there and done that when it comes to navigating the career. So 2 coaching options are available for everybody. And then underneath that is just a library of resources that are things we've found along our careers that were things that we've, this, if you build it 3 times, then just build it once and then make it a template. Mm-hmm. So there's tons of templates tied to, checklists for one-on-ones, job descriptions if you're a manager, interview question guidebooks for if you're looking to navigate that marketing interview. So really just focused on those key career moments inside the marketing career. And then there's a community as well. So a place to join other marketers that are, most likely going through either the moment that you're going through or can help you with moments that you've been through.
Oh, that's huge. I wish I had that throughout my career. Many of times the community aspect is really key there. I think when you're thinking about, again, leveling up in your current role, like investing in the company that you're with or looking to make a switch, it's like you need a sounding board. And that's the first thing that I realized when I was switching into, still in the leadership role that I was in, but becoming a CEO, was I need somebody. I need somebody that has done this before. Number one, I'm not going to be afraid to ask for help. And that's in your name. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That doesn't mean that you're ask for help. It's totally cool to do that. And that was the best thing I did was, and a lot of times, again, pat myself on the back. He's like, you're doing all the right things, but it was boosting my confidence of sure. Yeah, you got this. It sounds like you have an idea. Why don't you just try it and run with it? And having that sounding board and having a coach just made me think about things a little differently.
And you're hit the nail on the head here in terms of the value of a coach. And that is, and I've seen this, and here's the tip, right? Here's the tip for everybody, is that we are our harshest critics on ourselves. It's why imposter syndrome is such a big deal, is we don't think we can do it. We're not ready. We're not good enough. All those things creep in. But all it takes is a trained eye to have a conversation with you to say, hey, wait a minute. No, you're actually doing better in this area than you think, right? The fact that you did this as an internship in college, actually is all you need to get your next job at an agency. They just, most of the time marketers don't see that. But again, the coaching, like you said, it can drive and build that confidence. And listen, getting someone over that first hump, I've seen it in marketers and just how they carry themselves and how they perform in interviews takes them to that first position. And then once you're in there, yes, there's still more challenges to come. But it's, oftentimes we overthink and underthink the things that matter. And sometimes an extra outside eye can identify those for you.
Yeah. Can I share with you how I applied to Smartacre?
Yeah.
Can I share that with you? Yeah.
So
this was 10 years ago. We weren't the company where we were then. It was a couple of guys who got started. But I started my cover letter off with, I know I'm applying for the AE position, but I'm more than that. And instead of doing a traditional resume, I did a full web page. I sent him a web page with like a full infographic about me, about all about me. And it was all like data and charts and my history and that little factoids about me that I've driven over 100,000 miles in, a 5-year span, commuting, and that I've worked on, this percentage of these type of clients. And, years and years later, the founder, he had a printout of it and he handed it back to me. He goes, "Here you go. This was you." And he goes, that was it. You really stood out. And I think that's important too, because I think, you have a choice now. Like that, we're definitely seeing that, companies are still, all different types of companies are still with a staff shortage, and you have a choice to go work for, a company that works well for you. But I think that's the other way too. Like companies are still picky. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to lie. We're still really picky. Like because fit is so important. Like it is so important that works. So standing out of the crowd, and it sounds like a lot of those resources, if you have questions, TheMarketingHelp.co is a good resource to get those.
Absolutely.
So we talk about balance on the agency balance. What keeps you balanced these days, Erik?
Well, I'd say, with two kids that are 14 and 12, so I'm almost a full parent of teenagers. We're a soccer family, so there isn't a day or weekend that we don't have some game, tournament, or something. And trust me, the last people you hear complaining about it will be my wife and myself, because we're enjoying these moments of watching them develop as people, as athletes, as teammates, knowing that everything they're going through, good or bad, is helping to shape them. Both my wife and I have both played sports in college, so we understand that, the value of that. So, the miles get logged, the late night practices, the weekend tournaments, that's a balance for me, right? Because when I shut it down, I mean, not really, because you run your own business, you never shut it down. But when I end the day, I really look forward to driving to practice. And I tell both my kids the best thing, my most favorite thing in the world is watching them both play. So that is my balance to everything else and all the things that come with running a company and just managing clients.
Yeah, that's really neat. It is cool to see. I have 2 teenage boys myself, so
right.
it's you blink and it's like they're different, and they're coming into their own personalities, and they're starting to look to you for advice and differently. So it's
or not in some cases.
Well, that's most. You're right. It's most of the cases like, oh, don't embarrass me, Dad.
Right. They become independent, and it's it's a middle school dance one weekend. It's going to be the prom in a blink of an eye. It's going to be something else after that.
Yeah. So we talked about your resources, but Erik, how can all of our listeners find you, follow you, check out your website? Can you share all that?
Yeah. So the marketinghelp.co is going to be the main. That's where I can help, and that's where you can figure out how I can best help you. LinkedIn's probably a good spot if you want to connect, keep the conversation going. I've got some other resources on my profile page. So it's LinkedIn. my profile is Harbison. And if you connect with me in LinkedIn, I just ask that you reference the Agency Balance podcast, and then I'll have context on how you heard about the Marketing Help and myself.
That's amazing. Erik, well, thank you so much for your time this morning. It was great to just talk about this and kind of be open with it. And hopefully we've shared quite a bit to our listeners and some tips and tricks along the way, and a good chuckle as well.
I appreciate it, Dave. Thank you for having me.
Subscribe to the podcast at agencybalance.com, Apple, YouTube, or Spotify.